Hello, everyone. My name is Christine, and I am here today with Kristen. And this is our 32nd episode of a show we've called Walking the Path, where we just take a look at what we're noticing in our lives, in the world around us. Both Kristen and I have been on a path of personal development, you could say, stepping into greater love, care for the self, effective communication, our relationships. Both her and I have facilitated groups in different ways. Kristen has facilitated a lot of ceremonies with our partner. I've done a lot of group healing sort of things through meditation. I've done a lot of hands-on body work. There's just a lot of, you could say, energy healing and working with the subtle realms. And so one theme that came up that Kristen and I will be exploring today is just how her and I have really trained ourselves to become sensitive and very aware to the subtle. So when I'm working with a group, I can tell when someone's disengaging, or I can tell when someone's having an emotional trigger. And so I'm always like reading the group and reading the space. And that's what those of us who desire to be effective facilitators do, is we train ourselves to become really attuned and sensitive and aware of the group. And then we come into an era like this, or a moment in the world process, in the collective human process, where people are viewing what's happening from so many different lenses and perceptions and perspectives. And here we are, having sensitized ourselves to the subtle realms of the emotion and the body and the energetics, perceiving what's happening through those realms, and then going, here's what we're noticing. What about what we're noticing? Do we communicate? Is it in our best interest to communicate it? If so, what do we say? And I'm sure everyone listening or watching to this has witnessed those who speak very loudly about what's happening in the world. And I think that tendency will come up in any of us to go, hey, like alert, take a look at this, or notice the trends, notice where we may be being led right now, or what future is being engineered for us, and is it the one we came here to create? So that's kind of the theme of our discussion today. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being with me.
Hey, Christine. I'm so glad to be here as always for episode 32. And yeah, it's been a lifelong journey, really, leading up to this very bizarre point in our human evolution and what will someday be looked at as history. It's been a long journey for me of honing, those subtle receptors and perceptors for energy and information. And it's been written about and talked about in many books and podcasts and things by many people. And yeah, it's kind of like speaking a different language in a way, or hearing it's like speaking and hearing a different language, because it goes both ways. And I've particularly found it challenging in the last year to figure out ways to relay what I'm experiencing and the information that I'm receiving from levels that aren't on the television or on the radio, which is where a lot of the general population is looking for truth and information and fact. So yeah, it's been a real test of patience, and it's been a test of really, really trusting myself. And it's always comforting when I hear something from someone else who's perceiving on these more subtle levels that they've perceived a particular thing or a feeling or a trend, and it's confirming what I've been feeling. And, I think that's a really big part of these episodes of Walking the Path for me. And it has been for the last few years that we've been doing this. Just relaying those subtleties and the patterns and the ideas and the concepts around, walking this path where, we're perceiving life from, we all have our own unique perceptions. And I think there's a commonality around people who are deeply living a spiritual life and walking that path where, yeah, you're not just reading the writing on the page or hearing the words that are being spoken. There's so many more subtle levels in and around and between all those things. And it's interesting to put words to it right now because I've never really talked about it too much directly. And yet it's very real, and it's our reality all day, every day, all the time. And so, yeah, it's tough, especially over this last year, hearing people say, well, science, 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 experts, 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 fact, fact, fact. And I'm hearing like, shh. And I'm just like, what? It's not meeting. I get it intellectually. Sure, the world relies on science, fact, and experts. um, to me, that's one of 10 billion levels of possibility. So yeah, there's definitely an incongruency in a really big way, and I'm suspecting, I'm sensing that there are a lot of us who are either we have been living from this place of subtlety and all of that perception that comes with it, and I also think there are people who were on the brink of moving into that realm of their reality, who are really stepping into that right now and like kind of surrendering to that possibly, which is really a curiosity for me. Yeah.
Yeah, because on one hand, it brings such depth and richness to life, as we know, when we move in and reunite with the heart and do our work emotionally to resolve what's happened in our past so we can actually feel in the now and have those things linked up again, and resolving our sexuality and the history around that, and trying to like integrate everything again, like wake everything up so everything's like engaged. It adds so much, yet it also makes it so we become aware of the people around us, aware of where the people around us are functioning from. When we're working primarily through the mind, where a lot of us have been taught to function from, then we often see what we want to see. We see what confirms our point of view or belief is just the way it is not everyone maybe who's listening or watching this now knows I did a bachelor's of science at Cornell University in upstate New York, and I was fully in that realm of science. I did human genetics, cell biology, biochem, physics. Like I lived that world, and someone even saying the word energy would make me cringe. And my mom's books on personal development was fluffy nonsense, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I just want to see the citations. So my defenses were up huge. Why? Because in reality, as I've uncovered over these years since, I'm highly sensitive and attuned to my environment, to the people around me, and I'm one of as many of those leader types are who have stepped into facilitation in different ways. Like we're aware of the group. Maybe it's from our tribal history or deep ancestral past. We're aware of the group. We're aware of the trends, what's coming, maybe other lifetimes where we've been invaded or taken over, is like that. Those memories in a lot of us are being alerted, like something's coming or something's trying to infiltrate, to come in and disturb what is organically developing in us. What are we going to do about it? And that memo is being filtered through so many lenses of perception and then responded to in so many ways with so many strategies. And the way I framed it sometimes is fear-based strategies or love-based strategies, because they tend to be very different, right? Fear-based strategies, how do we protect, preserve, defend, shut down, get tighter, get more rigid, make it secure so nothing and no one can get in. But then we're not living either. You're stuck in a prison alone. So yeah, you're safe, but you're also dying. So love-based strategies are like, what do we need to do to become more resilient, more intelligent, more resourceful, more capable of connecting, bridging divides, becoming capable of translating messages in different languages, even if it's the same technical language, say English, right? There's so many different frameworks that can be used to communicate information, and then try to translate energetic information using language, because there's so much nuance that comes through those fields. So I really wonder, in this phase of development, how we can communicate what we're aware of and what elements of it we need to communicate using language. And I think the more stressed we become, or the more we feel that being invaded or taken over or prevented from living is imminent, then we become, if our emotions are imbalanced, then we just become explosive and want to just yell and scream and push and have a tantrum, right? So ideally, we want to handle our history, develop ourselves emotionally the best we can, so we can harness that fuel or energy in congruence with our heart's wisdom and body intelligence, and in connection with this greater universe of truth and possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one key word that stuck out a moment ago was you were talking about stress, and what I'm getting is anyone who's living in a constant state of fear and anxiety right now, they're operating from their mind. They're in defense mode, and any information that doesn't fit the paradigm that we've all been fed our whole lives would be an intruder and not safe. And so I think for me, this is definitely true for me, and I suspect it might be true for other people too, is that when I'm at my most calm and grounded and centered place is when I can read the most layers of subtlety and receive the most information and kind of get a read on things. And so, I guess I would just encourage and invite people to find those ways to, I feel like a little bit of a broken record, because I feel like we talk about this all the time, but finding those ways, those practices and tools and places and people who are most calming, grounding, comforting, and safe. And, see what comes in. And if you're already starting to connect with those subtle places and those subtle energies and messages, how much are you trusting that? That would be my question. I sometimes ask myself, am I trusting this too much? Like, am I blocking out like the fact and science and all the blah, blah, blah that a lot of people are treating as if it's the only ultimate truth and it's just God? But I don't think so. I'm taking into consideration my intellectual self and my intelligence, and it is, again, one of many, many, many layers of intake of receiving and sharing information. So yeah, I think just remaining calm and allowing ourselves to be in our sympathetic nervous systems, totally calm, self-regulated, and open, receptive, not open, vulnerable to anything that we don't want, but open, receptive to truths, multiples, because there's not just one truth. And, what do we do before science and what will we do after science? Can you imagine a world after science? Like, what if there's something new that comes in and just like crushes science, and we're all like, wow, science was good while it lasted, and now we're in this new schmience over here. Like, I don't know. I've never thought of that before, but yeah, I guess just what else is possible? What can happen if the majority of humanity can shift into that calm, receptive, like superhuman state?
Mm-hmm. And just recognizing, as we have during our own path of healing, how intense it can be to attempt to resolve trauma from our past, from our childhood. And when those emotions resurface, how destabilizing that is and inconvenient it is to just be crying for no reason. Because as more love enters the system and tenderness, a lot of that harshness, we grieve for what we've lived through. And that's, say, just the history, not taking into account what's arising now and what's happening now that adds to that. And it's such an art to be able to distinguish historical content from what's happening now, because they usually ping off each other, right? And there's so much now that brings up, again, our parental relationships, like how we felt as a child. Do we feel controlled? Do we feel free? Did our parents listen to us? Did they care about our perspective? Did they decide for us? Did they give us choice? A lot of that is playing out on the bigger picture now, because that's how we've treated government a lot of times for a percentage of humans, is as a parent, the parent corporation, or the parent who will guide the well-being and safety of be citizens of the country. And there's just so much like in question right now. And comes back to, here's the moment I'm in, to take a breath. How can I care for myself? When things arise in our emotional body, when we witness things, or especially those of us, if we grew up, I'll give my example. I grew up in a family where the MO was just be positive and you'll get through it. So there's a lot of unwillingness to acknowledge things that weren't positive, right? So things that were happening, or even pain, it's like, you're fine. Like, let's just not give a lot of attention to that. Just keep going. You're good. So then in years after that, I chose to rebalance myself and be able to see what was bad or negative in me and give attention to grief, sadness, despair, and all of that, all aspects of me that felt unseen in that light of positivity, right? That just felt unseen, unmet, unacknowledged. So that as I see, meet, and acknowledge it, and have healers and guides acknowledge it with me, there's true resolution. And then there's peace around that particular thing. But as we're seeing in this era with, say, the infamous phrase, safe and effective, that when there's evidence or anecdotal evidence coming out that that's not always the case, and then those kind of bringing forth that message are unwilling to adjust the message, no matter what, that can enrage, right? Those of us who have that cord around, you say one thing and do another, or you say everything's okay, but then I got really hurt, so I can't trust your words, or your word talk is cheap. Like any of us who have those cords through our upbringing will just feel the fire lit around this. And so it's just this art of acknowledging our upbringing, acknowledging where our triggers and cords are and the themes. And there's wisdom inherent in that. So as we rebalance our childhood, we may be really effective at naming incongruencies, or when they're saying one thing, but this is the reality. These two are different things. Can we please acknowledge that they're different things? Whatever is alive in us, just acknowledging that. And we're just coming to a time where I feel like so many of us will be pushed to our edge, or have moments of feeling pushed, back against the wall, and really having to act in our best interest and advocate for what's true from our deepest core heart wisdom. And many of us are anticipating that and can sense that time coming where there will be more divide. And so, the key is to have as many resources as possible, tools as possible, so that we can meet those moments with grace.
Yeah, grace. It's it's been an interesting dance to find that over the last year for me. I feel like I've done pretty well, but I've definitely had my moments where I've felt like my back was up against a wall, and I've felt trapped and like my voice couldn't be heard by anyone. And I've just had to consistently check in, surrender, accept, and choose the right path forward for myself. And in that realm of divide, that's been happening for at least the last year already now. And there are these new layers that continue. First it was like, are you social distancing? Divide. Are you wearing a mask? Divide. Are you following all the rules? Divide. Are you staying at home? Divide. Are you taking the vaccine? Divide. It's just like, okay, when's this division going to stop? And then they layer in all the other divisive things, all the race and gender stuff. And it's just like, I've been hearing plenty of people sharing that they're like so overloaded with all the division and like possible ways to offend one another right now. People feel like it's better off to just stay at home and keep their mouth shut. And like, what is that doing? Yikes. It's pretty wild. But just searching within and asking ourselves how we can show up for ourselves with the most grace, love, and compassion and really in spite of what anyone anywhere is saying or doing, because it's more important now than ever to tap into what our own inner truth is, and just really hold strongly to that, while remaining open to new information and all those subtle layers, and just really, really getting comfortable at home in your own knowing. And yeah, it's been tested. There have been many days over the last year where I felt like this tiny little sailboat out in the middle of a huge ocean in this giant storm of unpredictable waves and lightning, and like, yeah, giant Moby Dick whales about to swallow the boat. And it's just been like, yeah, there have been plenty of days where I've definitely felt like that. I feel like they've been lessening, but I still all of a sudden will have a day for no particular reason that I can explain externally, where I'm feeling like that little boat at sea, but always coming back to that safe and comfortable place in my own truth, in my own knowing, regardless of what any news articles or, experts are telling the world. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
One thing to recognize too, when we start to open up these channels of perception through our heart, through our body, through these fields of consciousness, you could say, or the unified field, often we receive information that's beyond time, right? There's a lot of talk around being in the now. It's not like past, now, future. It's like now, which includes all time, past and future. So when we're truly in the now, it means we're perceiving beyond time. So we can receive information that may actualize in reality in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, but it feels like now. So that's been the greatest art for me in this last 10 years is discerning timing and sequence of things. Because I know in 2010, when I had an event in 2015, I was like, oh, that's what I was aware of in 2010. But I thought it was like tomorrow, not 5 years later. So just keeping that in mind too, because we may actually be in a moment where there's not a lot happening on this surface, but we may be perceiving something that will actualize in about a year as though it's tomorrow. So just something to consider for those of us who perceive through, you could say, other realms or different modes of perception, is that often we're perceiving beyond time. So it can all feel like it's happening now. And on one level it is, but on another level, we are currently working in this kind of time-based, sequence-based creation. So it's not all happening in time as we know it. But I just share that when it feels overwhelming, because I know for me, in 2010, I was feeling the grief that will probably be what happens in reality in about 2024 for the collective, right? But I was processing it then so I could help in the future. Like we do those sorts of things because there is with so much wisdom in us, those of us who have chosen these paths of authenticity and love and wanting to be part of the creation of a world that honors the heart, body, and mind, right? And brings out the best in us and nurtures life. So lots to say. We could, on one level, go on and on, naming these nuances. And thank you, though, to those who tuned in and watched and listened to this. And I'm sure we'll be back with more, acknowledging that we're all on this adventure, as it were, of walking the path. And here we are. We are here, and may we all receive the support and the care and the nurturing for ourselves and be able to offer that to those around us and build a future that reflects what lives in our heart. So thank you all for being with us today. And thank you, Kristen, for being with me on this episode.
Thanks, Christine.